Early autumn brought a hint of chill from Lake Granville in the north, drifting down into the small town of Maple Shore. The rows of maple trees lining the entrance to Riverbend High School had begun to turn golden, signaling another season of changing leaves. Under the brown wooden eaves of the art classroom, Mila Kovalenko sat quietly, gazing up at the pristine white sketch pad before her. She gently flexed the black pencil between her warm fingers, then looked down at the paper, where the first strokes of her portrait of Mr. Jim Albright were slowly emerging. The ruler tapping quietly on the desk reminded Mila that class was about to begin, but she was still absorbed in perfecting each small detail of her respected teacher's face. In the corner of the room, the morning light filtered through the tall windows, illuminating stacks of canvases and neatly arranged paints on the shelves. The subtle scent of grape incense urged the imagination of the 11th grade students onward. Mr. Albright, a small framed man with silver hair, approached Mila's desk and asked softly, "Which portrait are you working on, Miss Kovalenko?" His tone was slightly humorous, but his eyes shone with pride as he observed his student. Mila lifted her head and returned a shy smile. "Sir, I'm trying to capture your expression as you explain Barbizon-style painting." Mr. Albright nodded lightly and then moved toward the blackboard to begin his lecture. Mila returned to her work, but her mind was not entirely focused. She thought about her coffee date with Orion Schaefer, a classmate who had awakened her love for indie music since last summer. They had arranged to meet after school at Birch and Brew, located on the corner of Elm Street. The small cafe sat next to the bus stop, with its rough brick walls, rustic wooden tables, and a cluttered bookshelf filled with vinyl records. In the moments between the gentle classical music playing in the background and the steaming hot coffee, Orion always made Mila's heart flutter. They shared obscure songs, each simple guitar note and melodious lyric weaving their youthful spirits together. The class passed quickly. At the end of the period, Mr. Albright reminded everyone that the mural competition would take place at the end of the month and encouraged students to form groups to complete their pieces. As the students lined up to leave, Mila turned and glanced through the wide window. She saw Orion dashing across the courtyard from a distance, his backpack bouncing lightly on his back, a broad smile on his face when he spotted her. In that fleeting moment, her heart skipped a beat. That afternoon at Birch and Brew was bathed in warm sunlight. Orion had arrived early, holding a small notebook where he jotted down song lyrics and sketched a title for his music project. When Mila walked in, Orion waved, his eyes shining with excitement. "Hey, talented artist," Orion said, pulling out a chair for Mila. She returned his greeting with a bright smile, setting her purse and textbooks on the table. She ordered a cappuccino, and Orion chose lavender tea. The low hum of the coffee grinder and the rich aroma of roasted beans helped them leave behind the worries of a tense school day. Orion showed Mila the new song he had just composed, a somber ballad called Autumn's Lament. He pressed play on his phone leaning against the partition wall. The gentle melody flowed like a slow-moving stream, interwoven with the soft sound of a flute. "Listen," Orion whispered, "I want this music to accompany the mural we're going to paint. Picture the Maple Shore landscape in autumn, maple leaves falling, and the lakeshore in quiet reflection." Mila listened, feeling each note pass through her fingertips, inspiring her to let her pencil touch the paper. She sketched a large maple tree with drooping branches. Beneath it, a girl sat holding a guitar, her gaze cast toward the sunset. Orion nodded approvingly. "You really think things through," he said. The warm moment passed quickly. They discussed their plan for painting the mural for the school's charity fair at the end of the month. They intended to invite more friends from art class, form small groups, and Orion would coordinate with the Rocking Rebels band to perform next to the mural area. The lively atmosphere promised an exciting project. While Mila immersed herself in ideas about color palettes, Orion glanced at her, his eyes sparkling. Their gazes met, as if the world around them had faded away. In that look, Mila felt a rare sense of safety, unlike the fear she felt whenever she returned home. As dusk approached, the two left the cafe together. They walked along the cobblestone path, where golden maple leaves carpeted the ground. With each gentle step, Orion took Mila's hand. He said nothing, but it was enough for her to feel his warm affection. In the distance, the street lights flickered on, casting long shadows onto the sidewalk. Between the quiet rustle of falling leaves, the silence carried a sweet sense of anticipation. However, along with the darkness came unspoken worries. Marcus Kovalenko, Mila's stepfather and a gambling addict, was once again absent all afternoon. Evelyn, Mila's mother, had called her only a few words before saying she was busy with work. Mila took a deep breath, forcing a smile as she stood before Orion. I have to go home early. Marcus seems to be waiting, Mila said bashfully. Orion squeezed her hand gently, concern evident in his eyes. Be careful. If you need me, I'll be waiting at the bookstore near the post office. Call me right away. Mila nodded, then left with a heavy heart. Returning to the small wooden apartment, Mila saw an empty liquor bottle lying on the floor. Marcus was sprawled on the sofa, his sweat and the stench of alcohol mingling into a thick stench. She whispered in a low voice, "Dad, I'm home." There was no reply. Mila pressed herself against the doorway, the hallway light spilling into the shabby living room, where scattered belongings and the image of a broken family stood in stark relief. She blinked away her tears. When she finally stepped into the living room, Marcus suddenly lunged up, his red, bloodshot eyes filled with rage. "You're home early. Did you bring ransom money for Dad?" he snarled. Mila's heart tightened. She knew Marcus had lost all his money at the casino, was heavily in debt, and now viewed her as a resource to exploit. "Dad, I only came back for dinner. I finished my painting, and Mom promised she'd drive me to my class reunion today," Mila tried to say calmly, though her voice trembled. Marcus, agitated, stood up unsteadily and knocked his glass of liquor against the wall, making the light waver. "A reunion with that Schaefer boy? Don't you want to give Dad some money?" "I'm not a thief, I'm just trying to survive." Mila took a shaky step back, staring at Marcus in fear. She brushed her bangs aside with her glasses, trying to stay calm. "Dad, I'll find a way to pay you back, but please don't yell at me." Her voice choked. Marcus grabbed her shoulders and shoved her hard. "Don't lecture me. I've had to wade through mud just to raise you. Now you're a freeloader, scribbling meaningless drawings so Dad can pay off debts." He was furious, and shoved her into the bookshelf. In a flash, the wooden shelf wobbled, books tumbled, and her unframed drawings were crumpled. Next, Marcus lunged forward, grabbing Mila by the hair and dragging her into the kitchen. "If you don't cooperate, I'll call the police and say you're extorting money from those young men at Birch and Brew. They'll arrest you for blackmail, and I'll be known as the cruel father who didn't care about his child." His bitter words sent a chill down her spine. Mila's heart pounded. She tried to knock the cigarette from Marcus's mouth, but he shoved her, sending her crashing onto the tiled floor. In the struggle, Mila slipped on the edge of the kitchen table. Her hand accidentally touched a large, rusty fruit knife lying nearby. She turned, fear in her eyes now hardened into resolve. Marcus lunged toward her, but stopped when the knife landed in her trembling palm. "Dad. Let me go," she choked out, trying to stay calm. He ignored her and moved to grab her. Mila could not bear it any longer. She jerked her arm fiercely. The blade cut through his kitchen shirt and struck Marcus in the abdomen. Blood gushed out, and Marcus let out a piercing scream before collapsing to the floor. In that terrible moment of silence, the kitchen door flew open. Orion stood in the hallway, his eyes wide with horror. He could not comprehend what had happened. He only saw Marcus lying in a pool of blood and Mila leaning against the wall, the knife still clutched in her hand. For a moment, Orion stood frozen, as if his heart had stopped. He rushed forward, snatching the knife from Mila's hand and immediately stashing it in the kitchen cabinet, then grabbed a cloth to staunch the bleeding. Mila screamed, "Orion, you can't. You don't have to do this." Her voice rang with fear. Orion said nothing. His actions were swift and decisive. He knelt beside Marcus, placing his hand over the wound, then turned to Mila with steely eyes. "You cannot say anything. I will take all the blame." He looked deeply into her eyes, as if to transfer some comfort to her. Within minutes, the doorbell rang, and flashing red and blue lights outside indicated that the ambulance and the police had arrived. Orion wrapped a towel around Marcus's torso to slow the bleeding. When the knocking became urgent, he stood and blocked the door until it was opened. "I will accept full responsibility. No one else is involved." Under the pale porch light, Orion's silhouette was alone and strong amid the chaos. Mila watched in silence, tears streaming down her face. She understood that for her sake, Orion was trading his freedom. She had no chance to stop him, all she could do was cover her face, ashamed and anguished. When the police stormed in, Orion calmly walked out with his hands raised, while Marcus was carried into the ambulance, curled in a dirty blanket. The image of Orion raising his head to give her one last look before being handcuffed would be forever imprinted in Mila's mind. As the sunset bathed Maple Shore in crimson light, two young hearts were separated in bloody silence. Mila stood by the small window in her bedroom, staring at the blank page she once used for her paintings, now smeared with blurred ink from her tears. The ashes of youth had been swept away, leaving behind an empty void. She wanted to call out Orion's name, but the word stuck dryly in her throat. The sky of Maple Shore was stained red like blood as dusk fell, the light fading beside the kitchen door where fate had irrevocably changed their lives. Mila Kovalenko, the introverted girl, sat there in speechless torment. The image of Orion walking away in handcuffs would haunt her forever, a reminder that love could demand the ultimate sacrifice, and that the price of sacrifice could be unbearably high. The bright light of the courtroom beamed down onto the stand where Orion stood, forming a cold halo around his bare shoulders. His breath caught as the judge read the indictment: Defendant Orion Schaefer, charged with intentionally causing grievous bodily harm, pursuant to Section 212 of the British Columbia Criminal Code. The courtroom was so solemn and silent that one could hear the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Mila sat motionless in the back row, clutching her worn jacket, her red-rimmed eyes fixed on Orion's figure from a distance. Her heart ached. She knew that, in that scene, Orion was accepting responsibility that was not his to defend her. Orion's defense attorney argued that the evidence at the scene indicated the court should consider that the defendant acted in a dangerous situation because his initial motive was not to harm Marcus Kovalenko. They presented surveillance video from the hallway outside the apartment, showing Orion rushing into the kitchen when the screams erupted, then aiding to preserve Marcus's life. But the prosecution insisted that the blood evidence and the weapon were hidden by Orion's own hands before the police arrived, causing them to doubt his intentions. All eyes were on the two of them. Marcus lay on a stretcher wrapped in a dirty blanket, his lips curled in a mocking smile though he was not fully conscious, a twisted display of truth and lies. The trial dragged on for 3 days, with questions sharpened like knives aimed at Orion's heart. Why didn't you get Ms. Kovalenko out to call for help instead of taking the injury yourself? And did you teach Ms. Kovalenko to use the weapon? Or did you have another motive to stage this incident? Each time, Orion simply shook his head, his eyes distant as if listening to an inner whisper, the beating of his own heart and hers. Mila could not hold back her tears as the questions cast suspicion on his honesty and sacrifice. Sentencing day arrived on a gray, drizzling morning. The atmosphere was heavy, as raindrops pattered on the courtroom's arched windows, each drop seeming to hold their last hope. The judge looked at Orion's face and paused before speaking. After reviewing all the evidence, this court finds that the defendant concealed the weapon to hide the act of causing harm. This action exceeds the bounds of lawful self-defense. The court sentences Orion Schaefer to 2 years of imprisonment. The moment the sentence was pronounced, Mila felt as though her head would explode. She wanted to run to the stand, grab Orion's hand, and shout, "It's not like that. He hid the weapon to save me." But she stood frozen, her sobs shattering the silence. Orion turned to look at her, his eyes, though sorrowful, managed a faint, reassuring smile directed at her. In that instant, Mila realized that even as her heart was breaking, it was not too late to know the depth of her pain. Maple Grove Penitentiary sat on the outskirts of town. The red brick prison was surrounded by high walls, with dark green pines standing in the distance. Orion passed through the heavy iron gates, where the guards stood at attention, their cold gazes scanning everything. He left behind the clinking of metal handcuffs and the heavy echo of his footsteps on the cold concrete. On his first day, he lay silently on his thin iron bed, gazing at the bleak sky through the bars, thinking about the happy days with Mila and promising himself that he would protect her until his last breath. During the early days behind bars, Orion participated in manual labor, but his mind remained suspended between the past and an uncertain future. Bland meals, rough brick walls, and the cawing of crows outside the window became his daily reality. When the wardens organized the weekly inmate meeting, Orion bowed his head and solemnly listened to instructions on discipline and rules. Still, he knew that every passing day was one farther from Mila, from freedom, family, and the dreams they shared. Yet in his heart, he could not shake the image of that little girl, fragile but strong, enduring pain without him by her side. Meanwhile, in Maple Shore, news of Marcus's near-fatal injury, thanks to timely medical intervention, he survived but occasionally showed psychological aftereffects from significant blood loss, and Orion's sacrifice spread quickly through town. Many old classmates visited Marcus in the hospital, gossiping about Mila and blaming her for having ruined a good boy's future. Evelyn, Mila's mother, appeared at Marcus's bedside a few days later, tears rolling down her cheeks as he solemnly recounted the truth of what happened. However, because of overwhelming debts and fear of public shame, she only muttered, "You're spoiled and don't know how to control yourself. If it weren't for Orion taking the blame, you'd be dead." That sentence pierced Mila's heart when she received the call about Marcus's condition. Evelyn's cold, merciless look told her she should leave Maple Shore immediately to avoid tarnishing the family's reputation. Mila returned to her cramped rented room, which still lay untouched since the incident. Everything was in disarray, her paintings strewn across the floor. She silently looked around, her heart bursting with guilt because Orion was behind bars for her sake, and her mother only wanted her to vanish. No comforting words, just oppressive silence. That evening, she slipped a small sketch of Orion into the hands of the manager at Birch and Brew, with a note, "If he needs this, please give it to him." Sure enough, a few days later, Orion received it by mail, the only gift he had to keep as a memento. In the following weeks, Mila poured herself into completing her scholarship application for Pacific Art University, remembering that Orion had dreamed of attending that school. She submitted a sketch showing a boy standing in darkness, a faint light shining in the distance, with the note, "This is our story." The university invited her for an interview, and Marcus was delighted, seeing it as a final bet to restore the family's honor. But even amid excitement, Mila didn't have the courage to contact Orion. Each time the phone rang, her heart raced, afraid it would bring more bad news about him. The next battle she faced came from Orion's family. Beatrice Schaefer, Orion's powerful mother, called the principal of Riverbend High and demanded that the school issue a certificate of inability to continue studies here for Mila. She was forced to transfer midterm. At that moment, Mila felt utterly helpless. No one was there to defend her, classmates treated her coldly, neighbors whispered behind her back. She stuffed her belongings into a backpack and moved to another small rented room near downtown Vancouver, 20 miles away from Maple Shore. In her tiny second-floor room in an aging apartment building, Mila lay on the bed in simple clothes, covered only by a thin blanket. She hugged her pillow, her red eyes staring at the unfamiliar city streets outside the window, where the sounds of car horns and subway whistles mingled. She remembered the past, those walks with Orion, the warm feeling of that early autumn breeze, and the rainy night when he held an umbrella over her, now seeming like distant memories. She blamed herself for making him pay such a high price. She broke down in sobs, her cries echoed in the silent room. The next morning, Mila went to work part-time at a cafe in the Disney district. She spent most of her mornings brewing coffee and wiping tables, and her afternoons illustrating online. Regular customers only knew her as the quiet, reserved girl always wearing a delicate silver necklace. In her free hours, she studied French and Spanish to prepare for university entrance exams. Despite her busy schedule, she was sometimes haunted by the whistling wind through prison bars at night, wondering how Orion was faring. She agonized over whether she should visit him in prison, but each time she thought of the courtroom and the regret in his eyes, she backed away. One chilly evening, Mila received a letter from someone identified only as an old friend. When she opened it, there were only a few brief lines: "I'm doing better. Please rest assured." No name was signed. She was instantly moved, tears streaming down her face. Although she knew it was from Orion, she still could not believe it was real. She folded the letter, hugged it close to her chest, as if feeling the warmth of his hands. As time passed, the letters grew less frequent. Sometimes Orion only sent her a sketch of the Maple Shore sunset where they once sat together. She kept every memento, drawings, letters, and even the delicate silver necklace Daniel had sent through the guard to Orion. She promised herself that one day, she would return his love when time had healed those wounds. 4 months later, all the paperwork for her scholarship was complete. The art faculty recognized her potential in every stroke, from her color blending and figure sketches to her ability to convey emotion. They advised her to submit an application for the upcoming fall exam. Mila nodded, her heart filled with a strange but familiar hope, the hope of one day reuniting with Orion and telling him she had always waited. That afternoon, as she stepped out of the cafe, the first winter breeze arrived, carrying the scent of drifting snow. She huddled deeper into her thin coat, brushing her sleek black hair back. Before her lay the long street leading to downtown, streetlights glimmering through the mist. Although her current life was still challenging, that night she felt a warm melody rise within her soul. Orion's letter, "I'm doing better," was like a flickering candle guiding the path ahead, even though it remained shrouded in uncertainty and obstacles. Mila took a deep breath, stretched her shoulders, and walked on, like a young woman beginning a new journey, the journey of reclaiming love and finding herself amid life's storms. A winter morning in Vancouver was truly different from Maple Shore. The high-rise buildings blocked the early sunlight, leaving only faint beams filtering through the window panes. Mila Kovalenko, now a first-year student in the Multimedia Arts program at Pacific Art University, wore a thick gray sweater as she walked across the campus shrouded in chilly fog. In her backpack were 2 sketchbooks, a box of colored pencils, and several drawing pads. Her heart pounded as she thought about her first class of the day, where she would have to compete with talented young artists from all over. "I just have to try my best. My place here isn't impossible," she told herself, trying to steady the mix of nervousness and excitement. Lecture Hall 12 was large, with drafts of wind swirling from above. Desks were arranged in a U shape around the room, and in the center sat a cluster of glowing desktop computers, waiting for the students. Professor Alex Rivera, who had exhibited graphic design at many international shows, stepped in with a bright smile. Holding a USB drive in his hand, he opened his laptop. "Hello, everyone," he said warmly. "Today we'll begin our first project, creating a storyboard for a 30-second short film on the theme Forgotten Fragments of Memory. Feel free to imagine freely, but you must incorporate motion simulation techniques and visual effects." His lecture ignited a spark in Mila's heart. She bit her lip lightly and took out her sketchpad, her hand idly tracing simple lines. The class lasted 3 hours. Around her, other students busily sketched future scenes, a person running through the rain with hair whipping in the sunset, a hand clutching a photograph of someone long gone, tears streaking the eyes. When it was Mila's turn, she sat silently, thinking. Memories of Maple Shore came back, but now covered by a stronger protective shell. Her heart sank. Did the person she loved most still remember her, or had he buried those memories in the chaos of time? In her mind's eye, she pictured Orion, always meticulous, with a gentle, longing smile. She decided to include them in her storyboard, 2 hands touching through a window frame, like a fragile but enduring promise. After class, as her classmates rushed out to socialize, Mila quietly packed her things, resolved to improve it tomorrow. On the way back to the dorm, she stopped by Green Grounds Cafe and ordered a hot mocha. The bitter taste tempered by chocolate soothed her tired soul. She sat by the window, watching bare maple branches trembling in the wind. The street outside bustled with cloaked figures hurrying to find warmth. She opened her sketchbook and quickly drew the image of a girl sitting by the window, eyes following the silhouette of a young man as he turned down a side street. It seemed as though each stroke was infused with her unending longing. Suddenly, the mocha cup clattered to the table, startling her, her hands shook and the paintbrush fell. "Focus, Mila," she told herself, picking it up and writing a small note at the edge of the sketch, "Don't let memories consume you." At Maple Grove Penitentiary, Orion Schaefer had just passed the 2-year mark of his sentence reduction. He stood before the heavy door of the administrative block, where guards checked the roster to prepare for his transfer. When the key clicked and the final gate swung open, Orion drew a deep breath, as if gathering all his strength from the cold air. The iron gate closed behind him, the echo resonating in his chest like the beginning of a new era. 2 years in prison had taught him the pricelessness of sacrifice and how to cherish every moment of freedom. He clutched his backpack containing a few worn clothes, the silver necklace Daniel had given him, and the sketchbook he had kept like a treasure. Outside, winter in Vancouver was still bitter. Snow began to lightly dust the brick walls and iron railings. Orion stopped at a small cafe near the prison gates and ordered a hot ginger tea. The spicy warmth eased the chill, giving him a measure of comfort. He sat quietly, his eyes searching for the name Green Grounds lingering in his mind. The barista handed him a slip of paper with the address of the former inmates support center, where he would register to find work and learn additional graphic design skills. The world outside was welcoming him, yet in his heart he felt a pang whenever he thought of Mila. Her last letters from nearly 2 years ago were smudged and faded. He no longer had an address to send to. Each night, he would secretly hold the silver necklace and imagine her, the girl who almost cost him his freedom. He whispered softly, "Mila, I'm still here, as I promised." On his first day out, Orion decided to visit Birch and Brew, the cafe where he and Mila used to meet. The street still carried the sound of the cart vendor's horn, but it was no longer as bustling as before. He paused outside the entrance, looking inside. The cafe still retained its rustic charm with its bookshelves and old tables and chairs. He went in, the scent of cookies and roasting coffee wafting around him. A new barista, barely 20 years old, looked up in surprise. "Can I help you?" the young man asked. Orion forced a smile. I'm looking for a girl named Kovalenko. Has she been here recently?" The boy shook his head indifferently. "I haven't seen anyone by that name. She hasn't come by in a long time." Orion fell silent, nodded in thanks, and left the cafe. The streets of Maple Shore seemed to have spun away, everything felt like a fading memory. Back in Vancouver, Orion went to the former inmates support center. There, he wrote an application for a graphic design scholarship, weighing every word carefully. He also volunteered for a project management class for the arts, joining a group of young people from diverse backgrounds. Gradually, though he still thought of Mila, he learned to focus on the present, accept the past but not let it define his future. Each night, he ate instant noodles in his small rented room, then sat at his old computer to sketch simple digital designs, his hands still retaining their precision and softness. In his heart, he dreamed of the day he could draw her smile again and see her eyes light up with hope. For Mila, the first few months at university were almost entirely consumed by classes and art. Her tiny dorm room was her world of rolled-up canvases, bottles of acrylic paint, and wooden boards tilted under the dim yellow lamp. Although everyone in the dorm was friendly, she still closed herself off in fear. If anyone discovered her past, her reputation and future could be shattered again. One day, she received news that she had been accepted to a collaborative project with the Vancouver Contemporary Art Museum, where she was to design a large mural on the theme Journey Beyond Darkness. She felt both thrilled and anxious. This project was her chance to prove her talent, but it also meant others would dig into her painful memories. On the weekend, Mila went to the museum to meet the selection committee. The project leader was Cristina Delgado, a renowned artist and lecturer with short silver hair and deep, insightful eyes. She nodded thoughtfully as she reviewed Mila's sketches, muted color schemes interwoven with images of figures rising from the ashes. "The concept is very powerful," Cristina said. "But I'd like you to incorporate movement, with some areas of light to depict recovery." Mila looked at the dog-eared magazine she held, a feature about a mural once displayed at UN headquarters, showing people emerging from darkness into light. "Yes, ma'am," she answered, her voice trembling slightly. Cristina smiled encouragingly. "You have talent and genuine feeling. Let your memories guide you, but don't let them completely consume you." Mila nodded, a newfound determination blossoming in her heart. Weeks later, Mila began painting the mural on the second floor of the museum gallery. The wall, pockmarked with old paint, was now her canvas, roughly 20 meters wide. Standing on a tall ladder, she sketched the first outlines, the shape of a girl hunched over, her hair covering her face, with a shadowy figure of a boy slumped on the ground behind her. The image reminded her of the night Orion took the blame, his shoulders trembling under the judge's lights. She loaded her paintbrush and swept on ash-gray strokes, painting darkness spreading from the two figures, as if separating them from the world. She paused and looked out the window, where snowflakes fell like crystalline beads. Her heart ached. "I am painting my own shadow." But she knew that the darkness would one day surrender to the light. Across the city, Orion began taking on small freelance projects, designing a logo for a restaurant, creating a poster for a local music festival. Though the pay was meager, he seized every opportunity to hone his skills. When he designed a poster for the indie band Frostfire Collective, he used a cool color palette and depicted a flame of ice, symbolizing the duality within himself, pain and hope coexisting. The band included the song they had composed, and it reminded him of Autumn's Lament, the melody he first shared with Mila. He sat in a small music club seat, recalling her expression when she first heard those notes. He wondered if she still listened to that song or had long forgotten those memories. During the long nights under the flickering computer light, Orion lay back, staring at the ceiling, thinking of plans to find her. He made a list of potential places: Birch and Brew, the museum, even small exhibitions in Seattle. Each time he visited somewhere and did not see her, his heart tightened. Sometimes he closed his eyes and told himself, "As long as you're out there somewhere, I will find you." But as time passed, "I'm doing better" became a faint memory in an old mailbox. He no longer believed in it, but he held onto that hope until the very end. One February afternoon, snow fell in tiny crystals outside the dorm window. Mila quietly finished the final touches on her mural. Suddenly, her phone rang, an unknown number from the Maple Shore suburbs. She hesitated before answering. On the other end came a few surprised syllables: "Mila. Is that you?" The hoarse voice startled her. "You. You're Orion." She couldn't find the words, only managing to stammer, "Yes, it's me." You found me? The line fell silent for a moment, then came Orion's choking sob. I've been searching for you for 4 years. Are you okay? In that instant, it felt as though the world had stopped turning. The unfinished mural before her blurred, making way for a brilliant golden glow of hope flooding the space. The phone screen lit up in the dim dorm room, the pale yellow light filtering through the thin curtain. Mila's phone ringtone echoed in the silent space. She intended to remove the wool scarf around her neck, but her hand trembled uncontrollably as she brought the phone case to her ear. Hello, R. Are you okay? Her voice quivered as if about to break. On the other end, Orion remained silent for a moment, then sighed softly. I'm better, but I still can't forget you. His voice was as light as a breeze, making her heart both happy and skip a beat. I'm painting a mural in the museum, she stammered. Is the painting finished yet? He asked, as if suddenly worried. Are you having any trouble? I want to see you right away. She hesitated, but then a surge of determination spurred her on. We can meet. Tomorrow, after I finish the mural, I will come to Green Grounds at 3 p.m. Is that okay? Orion took a deep breath, his tone warm and steady. Okay. I'll wait for you. They fell silent, only the sound of wind rustling through the receiver before the call ended. Mila stood quietly, her gaze rising to the enormous sketch now covered in its final layer of paint. She gave a small smile as tears rolled down her cheeks, thinking of the moment that awaited. The next day, Vancouver was still bitterly cold, with drizzle mingling with falling snow. At the Vancouver Contemporary Art Museum, Mila bent over in front of the expansive mural. Every line and color block, from ash black to dark brown, gradually shifting into bright yellows, now completed the journey beyond darkness. The silhouettes of people undulated and interwove like tangled memories, but in the lower right corner, a warm beam of light reached upward, symbolizing hope that never dies. She set down her brush and stepped back a few paces to take it all in, trying to hold back her emotions. Beside her, the art assistants gave one last inspection and nodded in praise. It's wonderful, Ms. Kovalenko. The selection committee will be very pleased, the project subcommittee said. She responded with a slight nod and hastily began packing up. When the afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass doors, she clutched her bag and stepped outside. The brick walkway led from the museum down to Granville Park, where rows of trees rustled, now bare of leaves. The moment her foot touched the sidewalk, her heart suddenly raced. Across the street, under a leafless canopy, a tall figure in a dark teal wool coat stood still. His contemplative gaze found her, and she hardly recognized him, more composed after 2 years of hardship. A familiar sensation rushed through her, like a slow knife slicing through longing. Orion. She hesitated, her voice hoarse. He stepped forward, his ash-gray scarf fluttering in the breeze. Mila, he replied, a smile barely contained on his lips. They stood facing each other, mere steps apart. Time seemed to freeze before this long-awaited reunion. In that moment, all the sadness, suffering, hope, and regret rushed back at once. Mila saw the same eyes full of love and worry as before in Orion's gaze. She stared at him, trying to find the image of the young man who once took the blame for her. He was taller now, his posture resolute, but his gentle tone remained unchanged. Is the painting finished? He asked, his voice so soft it could make her burst into tears. She nodded, tears spilling over. He reached out quickly to brush her cheek, as if wiping away the cold tears. You look wonderful, he whispered, as if afraid any louder word would shatter the fragile space between them. They sank into a moment overflowing with happiness and anxiety. The city's noises faded into the distance, only their fluttering breaths and pounding hearts remained. Orion gently asked about her life in Vancouver, about the mural competition and the difficulties she had faced. She spoke of her family forcing her away, of studying art tirelessly, of working part-time at a cafe to make ends meet. Each word carried both regret and pride. I didn't want to rely on anyone, you know. I stood up on my own. Orion listened quietly, then took her hand in his eyes shining. You are stronger than I ever imagined. I'm very proud of you. They walked together to a small table inside Green Grounds Cafe. The scent of freshly roasted coffee mingled with a hint of cinnamon, making the space feel even warmer. They ordered 2 mochas, set them side by side, and sat facing each other. Both were bashful, their hands hesitant to let go, still haunted by the past. Orion smiled softly and handed her a tiny silver necklace. I've kept this, never wanting to return it. Now I want to give it back to you, so you know I've never forgotten you. Mila accepted it with trembling hands, her eyes red-rimmed. I'm not worthy. I don't know what to say. He shook his head gently. You are more worthy than anyone. You've endured so much. She bowed her head, then looked up at him. Do you have any regrets? He hesitated, then answered earnestly, I wouldn't change what has passed, because without it, I wouldn't know how important you are to me. She gave him a shaky smile as a tear slipped down her youthful face. After those first sentimental words, they gradually opened up more. Mila asked about his life after prison, about his graphic design work. Orion told her about the small projects he had taken on, his efforts to find a place in the industry. She shared news of an upcoming exhibition, how she was turning the mural into a stepping stone for her career. The more they spoke, the more their fondness grew, as though their wounds were being stitched closed with every conversation. They laughed together, occasionally punctuated by long silences that were not awkward but rather felt like rests in a piece of music, easing their lingering tension. As the sunset deepened outside the window, the sky turned a mystical pinkish purple. Across the street, the neighboring restaurant's lights glowed, and the neon of a bar reflected on the wet pavement. They rose and made their way through a narrow side street to the Fraser River bank. Their footsteps left prints on the damp sidewalk, and the gentle lapping of the water whispered blessings. In that space, Orion took her hand and looked up at the hazy sky. We once promised to paint a big picture of the Maple Shore sunset together. Now, would you like to make that dream come true with me here? Mila nodded softly, her eyes sparkling with happiness. You know I've always been waiting for that. A light kiss brushed against the breeze, and they fell silent, listening to the river's whisper as if marking a new beginning. Now, there was no longer an all-encompassing darkness chasing them, only the faint glow of sincere love. They sat on a bench by the river, hands intertwined as a promise never to let go. In Mila's heart, the journey beyond darkness was no longer just an impersonal painting, it was the love story between her and him. Side by side, they sketched the first outlines of their new project, a magnificent painting of 2 young lovers crossing the storms, hand in hand toward the future. That night, when they parted in front of her dorm, Orion looked at her for a moment and spoke in a warm tone, Tomorrow I'll come early so we can meet with the group to sketch. I want to invite 2 friends I trust, Lee May and Sam. They're both great at perspective and color. Mila smiled, her heart brimming with hope. I'll let you lead. I believe we can create something extraordinary. He nodded, then unexpectedly bent down to plant a gentle kiss on her forehead. I love you, he whispered. She returned his embrace as if her heart also wanted to say, I love you too. Under the pale glow of the streetlight, their 2 figures quietly faded into the night, leaving behind the faint light of newfound faith and passion. The early days of the week dawned to the sound of pencils scratching and brushes gliding lightly over canvas. In the small studio atop the dormitory, Orion, Mila, and their 2 new collaborators, Lee May, a Chinese girl with a keen eye for perspective, and Sam, an African-American young man specializing in color, were fervently sketching the general layout for their large-scale painting. A1 sheets were spread across the wooden table, each bearing different drafts. One had a drawing of 2 hands intertwined against a sunset, another depicted 2 silhouettes climbing through a dark cloud toward the light. All revolved around the theme Maple Shore sunset, but set against a Vancouver backdrop, the wide Fraser River, modern skyscrapers, interspersed with the silhouettes of color-changing maple trees. Orion's laptop glowed softly, displaying the song Autumn's Lament he had once sent to Mila. Its poignant melody drifted gently, uplifting everyone's spirits and infusing fiery passion into their painting. Li Mei lightly adjusted her black hairpin, eyes half closed as she imagined light filtering through autumn leaves. "I think adding some shimmering details would evoke a sense of hope," she said, pointing to the center of the layout, where the two main characters were clasping hands. Sam smiled softly, his voice warm. "Right. I've experimented with the color palette, adding silver highlights at the edge of the sunset will create a sparkling effect when the light hits." Orion nodded, then turned to look at Mila, his gaze full of admiration as he awaited her approval. Mila smiled, her lips moving slightly. "I like that idea. Let's have the light reflect on the grass, drifting over to the riverbank. It will make viewers feel as if they're immersed in the emotional flow." All four agreed in unison, then continued eagerly translating the drafts into color-filled grids. Over the following afternoons, they gathered in a small studio in the Commercial Drive neighborhood, a renovated old apartment-turned-painting workshop. The large canvases were secured on tall wooden easels, ready for the first strokes of paint. Orion took charge of mixing paint, adjusting hues according to Sam's specifications, while Li Mei diligently outlined the contours. Mila, standing in the center, swept her brush across the canvas, painting layers of black, gray, and brown. The painting gradually took shape. The beginning showed bent figures in darkness, representing painful pasts. In the middle, the two main characters clutched hands as light began to emerge. Finally, the background revealed a brilliant sunset over the river, with a flight of geese headed north, symbolizing the yearning for freedom and an open future. One Friday afternoon, they decided to spend time by the Fraser River to study the real light. Autumn in Vancouver had begun to tint the horizon purple, a cold breeze made the water shimmer in silver tones. Orion wore a knit cap and carried his camera, snapping several shots. Li Mei slipped off her shoes and gingerly stepped onto the wet, sandy shore, admiring the moss-covered rocks. Sam stood nearby, explaining how to blend colors from reality. "Here, when the sunset reflects on the water, you see warm yellows mingling with deep blues. Capture this moment." Mila closed her eyes briefly, feeling the cold brush her temples, then opened them to find her heart quiet. She pulled a brush from her bag and immediately sketched in her notebook the silhouettes of a girl and a boy against a gray urban backdrop, with a vibrant yellow light rising behind them. "I want to emphasize the contrast between darkness and light," she said, then smiled softly. Orion bent down and hugged her shoulder, whispering, "You are doing great." Their four-person effort extended beyond art. They pooled their resources to pay the studio rent, purchase paint and canvas. Sometimes they handed out flyers to attract sponsorship from nearby cafes and shops. Orion took on communications. He planned social media posts with short videos documenting their painting process, drawing attention from the young art community. Li Mei handled poster design, while Sam managed the website to showcase their sample designs. Remarkably, from a modest project, they secured sponsorship from a well-known nearby cafe, the Roasted Bean. The cafe's owner believed in their talent and agreed to cover part of their costs in exchange for displaying the cafe's logo in the corner of the painting when it exhibited at the museum. Amid the days of vigorous work, Mila maintained the habit of video calling Orion every night. They sat together before their computers, sharing updates, which colors were mixed correctly, which composition angles were discarded, and little stories from tense moments. Orion shared that he had just received a contract to design a poster for a local music festival, giving him extra motivation to build his reputation in the industry. She talked about her museum interview and the chance to have an official exhibition next month. Each time, their eyes shone with genuine joy, as if the four walls could not contain the spreading love and ambition. However, not everything was peaceful. One evening, after packing up to head home, the group returned to the bus parked on the street. Suddenly, The bus lights flickered and went out completely. Orion fumbled for his phone and found a message from an unknown number: "Stop painting or risk losing your career." The content was brief, with no sender indicated. He turned to Li Mei and Sam, his eyes full of worry. Li Mei frowned. "Maybe it's one of my anti-fans. They discriminate against newcomers in the field." Before Sam could respond, a sleek black car slid into view from afar, then stopped. Two men with faces covered by caps got out and blocked their path. "Where do you think you're going?" "That big mural project of yours could change the selection committee's reputation. Stop it immediately." Orion gasped and shoved the man in front of him. "No one has the right to threaten us. We're working legally." The man yelled back, "Legal? You're just a bunch of poor students wanting quick fame. We won't let that project happen." Not waiting any longer, Orion shouted, "Get lost!" and pushed him down hard. The two men, terrified, jumped into their car and sped away into the misty night. Sam breathed a sigh of relief, while Li Mei trembled. "We are just trying to rise up. How can they resort to sabotage?" After that incident, everyone's mood remained tense. They decided to pause their marketing efforts temporarily and focus on finishing the painting. But the threatening messages continued: "If you keep painting, something big will happen." Orion ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "I can't let this stop us. We must go on." Mila spoke with determination. "I won't back down. We can use photos of our process to prove we're not doing anything wrong." She also suggested contacting the museum for protection if needed. The next day, they went to see Cristina Delgado at the museum. She clasped their hands firmly, her eyes resolute. "I've dealt with challenges before. We won't allow faceless bullies to intimidate you. From now on, the museum will be your support. If necessary, we will provide surveillance footage to protect your rights." Her words felt like a warm wind, giving all four of them the courage to complete their work. Finally, on a late October day, the journey beyond darkness was completed at 20 meters long and 3 meters high. It was hung proudly in the main exhibition hall of the Vancouver Contemporary Art Museum. The opening drew over 100 guests, artists, critics, collectors, and the public. When the ribbon was cut, Cristina stood beside Orion and Mila, her satisfied smile radiant. All the lights flashed on, golden hues mingling with the dark tones in the painting, creating a dazzling effect that made the audience marvel. In the crowd, a few hidden faces still cast furtive glances, proof that the threateners had not given up. But this did not dampen the celebratory atmosphere of their triumphant moment. Amidst the resounding applause, Orion and Mila stood side by side, hands clenched tightly. Tears of joy streamed down her cheeks as they quietly basked in their achievement after months of hardship. She looked at him, her eyes full of love. "We did it, didn't we?" He smiled and gently kissed her forehead. "Without you, I couldn't have done it." In that moment, they felt that the most arduous chapter of their journey beyond darkness was behind them. Before them lay a vast future, where two young artists who once had ink-stained hands in high school had grown into mature creators, ready to challenge all prejudices and trials. Under the shimmering lights of the opening night, the four friends bowed to the audience, their radiant faces reflected on the giant mural. They knew that the road ahead would still be full of challenges, new projects, media scrutiny, fierce competition in the art world. But this time, they were not alone. They had each other, and most importantly, the steadfast love between Orion and Mila, which was enough to illuminate their shared path, no matter how dark the clouds that might gather. In the days following the conclusion of the Journey Beyond Darkness exhibition, Orion and Mila's living space seemed suffused with an excitement that defied description. In the morning, Orion would wake up while the city of Vancouver was still damp with fog. He'd glance over and see Mila curled under the covers, her long black hair tangled from her slight movements. They had rented a small room in Mount Pleasant, an area where the rent wasn't exorbitant yet still provided enough space for their artistic work. The modest room held just a bed, a wooden table and chair set, and a bookshelf lining one wall. They stored the original Journey Beyond Darkness painting tucked away in a corner, though not displayed. It reminded them day after day of the challenges they had overcome. On a Monday sunrise, Orion sat in the tiny kitchen, brewing home-roasted coffee before heading to work at a local graphic design firm. He slipped into a warm brown sweater, carefully stowed his wallet in a drawer, then rose from his seat. At Orchard & Company, he was beginning to take on small poster and logo design projects. Today, he had a meeting with the head of marketing to discuss a new logo for a bubble tea chain set to open on Granville Island. He carried his tablet, which already contained a few draft sketches, a stylized branch of tea leaves placed atop a porcelain teacup, with smooth, flowing curves conveying a sense of elegance. Upon entering the sleek glass office, he sensed a lively atmosphere, colleagues chatting merrily, the printer humming in the background. After a few minutes of discussion, the marketing manager nodded in approval. "Mr. Schaefer, this logo conveys freshness and energy. We'll proceed to print a test run and get back to you soon." Orion managed a light smile, feeling a warmth bloom in his chest. As he stepped out of the building, he pocketed his phone and prepared to return for his next task, picking up Mila and heading to their upcoming project meeting. Meanwhile, in their small studio corner, Mila had been up for a while. She quickly made herself a breakfast of toast and over-easy eggs, then sat at her drafting table to continue her personal painting project. Her new series was titled Light Through the Cracks, a set of small canvases each depicting a window frame, with light streaming through and illuminating objects inside. She arranged 3 canvases side by side, each about a meter tall. On them, she sketched out her concept. The first canvas portrayed a shuttered window with only a faint sliver of light breaking through. The middle canvas depicted a partially opened window with blinding brightness pouring in, and the final canvas showed the window fully open, with light flooding the entire room. Each painting would feature the silhouette of a young woman, representing herself, slowly pushing open that window, seeking freedom after suffering. Her dominant palette ranged from dark brown and charcoal black, gradually shifting to a radiant honey yellow. She carefully mixed paints on her palette, her brush gliding across the canvas as though caressing each layer of color. In that moment of quiet concentration, she heard a soft knock at the door. "Are you up yet?" Orion's voice called from outside. "I left the key under the mattress." She smiled, wiped the paint from her hands, and opened the door. Standing there was his gentle smile, and behind him, a bag of breakfast items he had bought the day before. "I brought egg sandwiches from that bakery near the market," he said, pulling her into a warm embrace. They inhaled each other's scent, as if these simple gestures were their greatest happiness. That weekend, the two of them met with Lee May and Sam at a small riverside cafe to plan their upcoming traveling exhibition series. They intended to take the Journey Beyond Darkness painting, along with other works like posters and printed canvases, to 2 neighboring cities, Seattle, USA, and Victoria, Canada. The group agreed to rent a small truck for transporting the artworks and reached out to local galleries to arrange installation schedules. Lee May volunteered to contact Seattle galleries. She had already connected with a few during a previous workshop. Sam focused on the printing details, gathering paper samples and assessing ink quality. Meanwhile, Orion and Mila turned their attention to creating a promotional pitch. They would produce a short behind-the-scenes video of their painting process, set to Autumn's Lament, and include a narration explaining the Journey Beyond Darkness theme. Finally, they prepared a sponsorship application for the Vancouver Arts Fund, hoping to secure a small grant to help cover travel and printing costs. However, not long after the meeting, Mila received a tense phone call. The number was unknown, originating from Maple Shore. She drew in a sharp breath, then heard a gravelly male voice. "Ms. Kovalenko, Mr. Marcus is still alive and is looking for you." Her heart pounded. Since Marcus had been discharged from the hospital, he had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only debts in Maple Shore. She gripped the phone tightly, her voice trembling. "What does he want?" The man growled, "He needs money to pay his medical bills. If you don't transfer 5,000 Canadian dollars to account X within 48 hours, he will sue you for assault and claim you used Orion as a scapegoat. Things will be stirred up again." His tone was icy. Mila fell silent as tears welled in her eyes. She knew she didn't have that kind of money in her account. The funds she had been saving for her personal project were earmarked for tuition and art supplies. She wiped her tears away and whispered, "I'll think about it." Then the line went dead, leaving only the ominous dial tone. When she told Orion about the threat, his face immediately darkened. "They are trying to terrorize you," he said, his eyes reddened with anger. "We can't let him continue to do this." They sat at the kitchen table, between a plate of toast and a steaming cup of tea. Mila exhaled deeply, her hands shaking as she gripped the table's edge. I don't know how to come up with that money. The upcoming exhibition project also needs a deposit to book the Seattle gallery." Orion looked up, determination blazing in his eyes. "I'll borrow it. I can't just stand by and watch you suffer." But she protested, "Don't do anything reckless. We just found our footing. If we take on more debt, the project will collapse." The two of them sat in tense silence, worry and guilt filling the air. Finally, Orion quietly pulled her into his arms. "Let me handle this. I won't let the past weigh you down any longer." Mila leaned against his chest, clinging to the calmness of his presence. "I trust you." The next day, Orion went to meet his colleague Brian at Orchard and Company. A cheerful fellow always eager to help. After hearing the situation, Brian nodded. "If you need to borrow that amount, I can introduce you to a few venture investors I know. But you need to have stable work, a long-term contract, a steady income, only then will they lend." Orion thought for a moment, then decided to sign a 4-month freelance contract for a Vancouver tourism campaign, with a high enough fee to prove his stable earnings. Brian clapped him on the shoulder. "Once you can show them itemized contracts, no one will bail out. The money will come." While Orion went to work, Mila pulled out her ledgers to crunch the numbers. She had just established a small online shop called Lumen Arts to sell prints of her Light Through the Cracks series. At first, she only posted a few images on her website and priced them modestly to attract buyers. Things moved slowly but steadily. After a few weeks, a local arts magazine ran a feature praising her work as lyrical and deeply emotive. Website traffic climbed, and she sold about 5 small print editions. She stashed those earnings in a red envelope, the first money she had managed to save since coming to Vancouver. Combining that with Orion's small bonus and the $3,000 Brian agreed to lend, they had more than half of what they needed to pay Marcus. On Friday night, they invited Lee May and Sam to celebrate at Green Grounds. The cafe still had the small corner table by the window where they'd had their first reunion. Everyone ordered drinks and pastries. Lee May raised her glass with a smile. "We've made a major stride. In just a few weeks, Lumen Arts and your project have made waves." Sam nodded in agreement. "I've heard in Seattle that an independent gallery is interested in hosting the show but lacks funding. They'll provide a prime stairwell space if we agree to let them sell a portion of our posters, splitting the proceeds." That news made Orion and Mila beam with renewed hope. After clinking glasses, they resolved to finalize shipping arrangements to Seattle early next week. But the next afternoon, when Orion took advantage of a break to deposit money to Marcus's account at the bank, he received another call, this time from a blocked number. He heard Marcus's exhausted voice. "Orion, could you come to Maple Shore? I need to talk to you." Marcus's voice sounded hoarse, nothing like before. There was a note of desperation. Orion was surprised. "Stepfather, what's wrong?" Marcus fell silent for a moment, then said, "Please come. I'll explain everything." Orion stared at his phone, his heart heavy. He looked up and called Mila. "I think you should come with me to Maple Shore. I don't know what he's planning." She replied, "I'll make arrangements right away." Be careful. And together, they packed their bags and booked bus tickets to Maple Shore. That afternoon, when the bus stopped in front of the Maple Shore Town Hall, Orion and Mila disembarked. The air was piercingly cold, a wind blowing in off Lake Granville. They walked along the brick-paved street, past the small park where the grass had turned brown. Returning to Maple Shore felt as though stepping back into another realm, the old shops, the gray sky, the sudden rush of old memories. They arrived at Marcus's rented house, a small wooden home perched on a hillside outside town. In the yard, they saw Marcus standing under the muted glow of a porch light, his silhouette looking gaunt. When he saw Orion and Mila, he held out a trembling hand. First, take a deep breath. I want to be perfectly honest with you. Marcus's voice was thin and weary, but sincere. Orion moved forward and embraced Marcus, the chill in the air seeping into his bones. Stepfather, what happened? He whispered. Marcus looked at Mila, his eyes haunted. Marcus. You know I threatened you. That was a grave mistake. I was terrified of my mounting debts, but I never realized how much I was hurting you. He shivered as he spoke, then summoned Mila's name, Mila. Thank goodness you're safe. Are you all right? She only nodded faintly, her eyes glistening. Stepfather. Forgive me. All I want is for you to stop involving Orion. Marcus sighed deeply, tears welling in his eyes. I don't know how to apologize. But I want to make amends. My hospital debts could be covered by social insurance if I sign a waiver of excess charges. I went to the hospital to apply, but they refused. They said the only way is to declare bankruptcy, to forfeit all my assets. I have nothing left. He let out a long exhale, burying his face in his hands, his voice choked. Orion realized Marcus was at his wits' end. He turned to Mila. She was silent, shoulders trembling. After a moment, she said, We will help you, stepfather. Orion, of the money you prepared to give him, we can hold back a portion to cover his bankruptcy paperwork. That way, all his debts can be cleared. Orion looked surprised. Are you sure? That means we'll lose some of the funds for Seattle, right? She nodded. I believe we can recover. You have already built a reputation, and I have too. We can enlist support from the art communities in Maple Shore and Vancouver. This is a chance to help him and demonstrate compassion. Orion squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with trust. You are truly strong. I agree. They turned to Marcus, who was standing there tremulous. Don't worry. We will do everything necessary so you can focus on your treatment. He broke down in tears, embracing the two of them. I don't deserve any of this. I don't deserve any of you. His voice faltered as tears blurred his vision. The three of them gathered around the wooden table in the living room, opening ledgers and paperwork. Orion outlined the temporary bankruptcy plan, using the $5,000 Canadian to pay the filing fee to extinguish Marcus's debts. Mila laid out Marcus's medical bills and debts on the table. They calculated every line item carefully, ensuring there would be enough to cover the legal fees while allocating the remaining balance to settle with the former creditors. As they signed the documents, Marcus's hand shook while writing his signature, and he gazed at Mila with remorse-filled eyes. You've suffered so much because of me. I'm sorry. She gently rubbed his hand, softly responding, All I want is for you to live in good health. That is all I wish for. They tidied up the paperwork, then Orion and Mila split up to submit the filings at the local bankruptcy office. As they left Marcus's home, the Maple Shore sky seemed to break open, revealing swaths of light through the gray clouds. They walked along the street in silence, hands still tightly entwined. Amelia, Orion's old friend who now worked as a clerk at the district courthouse, stamped their bankruptcy papers with official approval within a day. Marcus's medical debt was officially discharged, and he qualified for public health assistance. As a result, he could continue his psychological rehabilitation at Maple Shore Hospital. That evening, when Orion and Mila returned to Vancouver, They sat together at the small wooden table in their studio, exhausted from the journey. Orion heated water for herbal tea while she removed the envelope filled with documents and set it in a corner of the room. In that quiet moment, there was only the soft creaking of the painting easel under warm lamplight. They both inhaled deeply, as if finally having unburdened their hearts. Orion placed a teacup on the table and looked at her. "I'm proud of you. I know you had to carry twice the weight so that we could have a future." Mila gave a faint smile, her eyes welling. "If it weren't for you, I couldn't have done it either. Together, we overcame that darkness and helped one person escape from it as well." They sat in silence, sipping their warm tea. After resolving Marcus's situation, the couple's spirits soared. They decided to take a few days' rest before diving into the final phase of their traveling exhibition. Orion confirmed dates with the Seattle Gallery, and Mila finished light through the cracks by adding a few touches of warm light to symbolize the yearning for freedom. A few weeks later, they drove the van loaded with paintings across the Canada-US border. On the I-5 highway, forested mountains dusted in snow gave way to deep evergreen vistas, leaving them in awe. They stopped for a quick lunch at a roadside rest area, sharing sloppy sandwiches and fries. Orion laughed and patted her back. "Do you feel free? We're now making the dreams we had back in Maple Shore come true." Mila squeezed his hand, her eyes radiant. "You're right. I feel free, I feel strong." They resumed their journey, bound for Seattle, where Journey Beyond Darkness and Light Through the Cracks would soon greet the public. When they arrived in Seattle, they delivered the paintings to the Capstone Arts Center, a small gallery located right on the Puget Sound waterfront. The gallery's director, Annika Jensen, a tall woman of Danish descent with bright eyes, gave them a warm welcome. She led them into a spacious room with pristine white walls and professional track lighting. Grasping Orion's hand, she said, "We are thrilled to exhibit your work. In fact, we'll host a small opening reception for this project." She turned to instruct her staff, "Prepare the rotating stands for the large painting, and position spotlights to illuminate the centerpiece." The four of them beamed as they personally adjusted the spacing between the artworks. Once everything was in place, they sat on the wooden steps leading to the front courtyard, where a few early guests had begun to gather. The background music was cued to Autumn's Lament, its gentle melody echoing the theme of their journey. The opening drew over 30 guests, local artists, art critics, a few collectors, and young art enthusiasts. As people entered, the light striking Journey Beyond Darkness created a profound warmth. Whispers spread. "The way the perspective shifts between the glossy surface and the spotlights is impressive. The transition from charcoal gray to golden hues evokes layers of deep emotion." Meanwhile, Orion stood by the wall, observing the attendees keenly. Suddenly, a tall, middle-aged woman stepped forward, her face aglow under the lights. "You are truly talented," she said with a subtle Nordic accent. "I would love to bring your work to the Pacific Northwest Arts Fair next autumn." Orion let out a breath of exhilaration, then turned to look at Mila, his eyes sparkling. She smiled, leaning into his shoulder. In that moment, all the hardships they had endured melted behind them. Before them lay a future of opportunity, the Puget Sound flowing steadily, guiding their dreams to distant shores. That night, as the gallery's lights dimmed and the streetlights' glow reflected off the glass doors, Orion and Mila sat together on the wooden steps, feeling the cold breeze against their faces. He placed his hand over her chest, where her heart was pounding. "Do you recognize this place?" he asked softly. She heard a tap of rain against the windowsill, then remembered their first Seattle exhibition, the smell of newly sanded wood, the echo of muted music. "It feels like we've been here before," she said with a gentle nod. He wrapped his arm around her, whispering, "Our journey is far from over. But no matter what, as long as I have you, I'm ready to move forward." She rested her head on his shoulder, enveloped by a profound sense of peace. In the distance, the city lights shimmered on the water like flickering gold and silver. In their hearts, a soothing melody played, the song of love, hope, and an unending quest to conquer the darkness. After the opening at Capstone Gallery in Seattle concluded, Orion and Mila decided to spend the night in the port city. They rented a small apartment right on the Puget Sound, its balcony facing the shimmering lights of the Fremont Bridge. That night, as the city's sounds gradually quieted, they stood together at the balcony railing, breathing in the damp scent of the water and listening to the lapping waves. Orion gently draped his wool jacket over Mila's shoulders, then stroked her hair, his voice warm. You know, every time I see the lights on the Fremont Bridge, I think of Maple Shore, a connection between our broken past and the future ahead. Mila bowed her head and softly replied, Me too. Seattle gives such a strange feeling, both familiar and new. I love conquering every obstacle alongside you. They let the silence linger, with only the sea breeze whispering. In that fragile moment, their hearts found peace, even though many challenges still lay before them. The next morning, they set out for Victoria by ferry. The vessel, carrying both cargo and passengers, glided across the calm water, passing islands that dotted the sea like nature's punctuation. Inside the cabin, the steady hum of the engine mingled with the chill of the North Pacific. Mila sat by the window, where sky and sea blurred together, lost in her thoughts. She exhaled softly, I'm so happy Seattle was a success, but I'm also anxious about Victoria, where we've never exhibited before. I wonder if the audience there will embrace our work. Orion turned to her, his gaze full of confidence. I believe in you and in us. Whoever the audience may be, they'll feel our message of hope and rising above darkness. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling as if his arm were the firmest support in the turbulent sea of life. By midday, when the ferry docked in Victoria, they took a taxi to Artisan's Loft, a gallery space in the very heart of downtown. The building, of classic architecture, had red brick walls and white-framed sash windows, its interior flooded with sunlight. The gallery director, Eleanor Finch, greeted them with a gentle smile. She clasped Mila's hand warmly and said, I heard about your success in Seattle. I believe your work will captivate Victoria's audience. We'll host a free exhibition opening to draw a large crowd. The soft thank you from both of them warmed the atmosphere further. They quickly descended to the ground floor, helping staff carry each framed painting onto the racks and adjusting every spotlight. By that afternoon, Artisan's Loft was ready. Journey Beyond Darkness hung in the center, with the Light Through the Cracks series displayed on either side, creating a striking visual journey. Victoria's opening ceremony buzzed with excitement. A large crowd, ranging from local artists to art students and families with children, gathered. Upon entering the gallery, they were immediately drawn to the painting's power. The lights reflecting off its layers of moving color felt like a living breath. A middle-aged woman approached Orion and said, I grew up in Victoria and have never seen a sunset captured like this. It reminds me of my own difficult times. But what moved Orion and Mila most was a 12-year-old boy standing quietly before the Light Through the Cracks series, his eyes glistening with tears. He turned to his mother and whispered, Mom, are these paintings the last lights guiding us out of all our pain? His innocent yet profound question reminded the two young artists that art, though made of mere color, could touch hearts and ignite hope. After the exhibition, they were interviewed by a local newspaper. A young, enthusiastic reporter asked them about their arduous journey. Not everyone has the courage to paint a story of wounds and healing. What would you like to say to young people facing crises? Orion looked to Mila, then gently answered, Everyone carries their own darkness. But if we grasp a loving hand, even if it's our own hand, we can still find the light. The reporter nodded, capturing the moment on camera, then ran the story under the headline, Conquering Darkness, Love and Hope from Vancouver to Victoria. Their days in Victoria passed swiftly. That weekend, they held a free workshop for students at Victoria High School. Eager pupils lined up to register, curious to try mural painting and learn about storytelling through art. Standing before the class with her easel and chalk pastels, Mila shared, "When we paint, we don't just record images, we convey emotions. Dark colors represent suffering, while bright colors symbolize hope. Art is how we dialogue with ourselves and with the world." Dozens of young eyes listened intently, sketching strokes on paper, stirred by the story of overcoming pain told by these two young artists. Upon returning to Vancouver after their long trip, Orion and Mila felt exhausted but exhilarated. They realized they had sparked a ripple effect. Across the Pacific Northwest, people were sharing the story of love and the journey beyond darkness. This gave them fresh motivation to continue their work. Returning to their studio, they felt that their little home had truly become a cradle for their shared dreams. Orion turned to her and said, "Do you know that every day these past few weeks, I've longed to come back and step through that door?" Mila embraced him, whispering, "Me too. This is our home." However, their joy was tempered when Beatrice Schaefer, Orion's mother, suddenly sent a lengthy, arrogant email. She accused Orion of tarnishing the family name and threatened that if he continued exhibiting internationally, she would revoke his access to the bank account she had previously set up in his name. Orion pressed his lips together to remain composed, but his eyes revealed his sorrow. Mila stood by him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry about it. Money is not a major problem, we can manage." Still, she knew that Beatrice's pressure would test Orion's resolve. The two of them sat at their work table, recalculating expenses for their next exhibition, this time in Portland, and exploring new contracts they could take on to achieve financial independence, no longer relying on Orion's family. That night, they worked through until 2 in the morning, listing potential clients, sketching sample illustrations, and reaching out to organizations that support emerging talent. The tapping of keyboard keys mingled with the swish of brushes on canvas until the desk lamp finally went out, leaving only the faint glow of the computer screen. A week later, Orion received an email response from the Silicon Valley-based Creative Spark Fellowship, an arts funding program for community projects. They invited him to San Francisco to present his vision of using art as a bridge for those carrying psychological wounds from trauma. This was a golden opportunity. If granted the fellowship, they would receive full funding for a large-scale exhibition and intensive training courses. Overcome with joy, Orion dashed into the studio to tell Mila. She beamed, embracing him. "This is our new turning point." Their exhilaration drowned out the memory of many sleepless nights and even Beatrice's harsh email. By month's end, Orion and Mila, accompanied by Lee May and Sam, traveled to San Francisco. They enjoyed fresh fruit at Fisherman's Wharf, strolled across the iconic Golden Gate Bridge, and witnessed firsthand the hustle and bustle of the city that was both a tech hub and a haven for the arts. At the Creative Spark Fellowship offices, they presented before a panel of jurors, experts in art, psychology, and creative technology. Orion shared the tale of Maple Shore, how he and Mila had stepped beyond darkness through love and art. Mila discussed Journey Beyond Darkness and how she transformed ashen tones into radiant light. Their presentation concluded with a video montage of their journey from Vancouver to Victoria to Seattle, images of children squinting at the paintings, light reflecting in their eyes, moving the audience to tears. The jurors exchanged glances, dabbing their eyes, and whispered among themselves, "This is a project with the potential to pioneer art therapy." 3 weeks later, Orion received the official invitation. The Creative Spark Fellowship would fund them to produce a major multimedia exhibition at the San Francisco Art Center and provide resources to conduct a series of art therapy workshops for veterans and individuals who had suffered psychological trauma. Both of them erupted in joy. On the rooftop of their building, facing west over the bay, they held hands. Orion whispered, "I know this is our biggest opportunity yet, but it also means more pressure." Mila nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "I'm ready. As long as I have you, I can face anything." They kissed under the star-studded San Francisco sky, the Golden Gate Bridge gleaming in the distance. It was a milestone for their new journey, a journey not only for their love, but also to weave hope into the lives of those who have endured pain. Returning to Vancouver after their trip, they promptly kicked off the new project. Their small studio buzzed with multimedia equipment, cameras, microphones, projectors, and brightly colored easels. They invited 2 psychologists from the Vancouver Mental Health Council to join as consultants for the workshop program. Every weekend morning, a group of about 10 veterans or trauma survivors gathered in the studio. They were encouraged to paint images representing their journey to recovery. Some drew colorful maps, others depicted the warm roof of home, and still others painted roads leading to the sea. Under Mila's guidance, they mixed paint and brought their individual stories to life. Meanwhile, Orion recorded their spoken experiences for a documentary video, layering it with the gentle melody he composed. Each painting and personal narrative became a piece of the hope puzzle, reminding everyone that, no matter how long the path to healing, each person could find the light at the end. Throughout that period, word of their studio and workshop spread via social media and local press. Many volunteers stepped forward, some handled space coordination, others helped clean frames after each session, and still others collaborated with charitable groups to bring hot tea and pastries to participants. A renowned psychiatrist even visited to offer guidance. Art can be an essential form of therapy for those carrying pain. What you're doing is truly meaningful. Such encouragement fueled Orion and Mila's belief that they were on the right path. One spring afternoon, as the studio buzzed with conversation and the hush of brushes on canvas, they sat together in the flower garden behind their building. The purple jacarandas were in full bloom, coloring the space with hues of hope. Orion took her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Do you remember the day I first saved you from the darkness in Maple Shore? Back then, I never imagined that just 3 years later, we'd be sitting here, in Seattle, Victoria, San Francisco, and Vancouver, sharing tales of healing." Mila looked into his eyes, tears of happiness glistening. "We've come so far. I can't imagine where I'd be without you." They sat in silence, their hearts beating in unison with the gentle spring breeze. For them, the journey was not just about painting or exhibitions, it was also the process of uniting imagination and love to mark every step beyond pain. In the 5 years since Orion went to prison, they had endured countless storms, family tragedies, heartbreak, threats from the past, hearts once shattered and hidden in darkness. Yet now, they had transformed those patches of peeling black into radiant light, helping entire communities heal. They knew more challenges lay ahead: financial pressures, fierce competition in the art world, and even obstacles from their old families. But with their sincere love and an unyielding quest for light, they believed no darkness could stop them from moving forward. And when the Maple Shore sunset faded, a brilliant new dawn was already rising on the horizon. After the Creative Spark Fellowship project kicked off, Orion and Mila were invited to San Francisco to lead their first art therapy workshop for veterans and individuals who had experienced psychological trauma. They arrived in a small neighborhood of Tenderloin, where an old but cozy community center awaited them. The walls were peeling, pale green curtains draped every window, and an antique mural on the wall had faded with age. Yet, as the veterans quietly filed in, each carrying stories they had never voiced before, the room was immediately filled with a hushed respect. Orion and Mila set up tables for drawing pads, pencils, watercolors, and blank paper. They dusted off the surfaces with handkerchiefs, arranged seating, and gently invited everyone to help themselves to hot tea and pastries to ward off the cold outside. Once the workshop began, Orion stood in front of the group of veterans, his voice clear. "We have all endured ordinary moments that felt deeply painful. Art does not need to be perfect, it must tell an honest story from the heart. Today, I invite you to put your pain onto paper using colors and shapes. Don't worry about technique, just let your emotions guide you." Their faces reflected solemn attention. A few veterans nodded slowly, some with reddened eyes. Sitting beside him, Mila held a brush and offered encouraging words. dress comfortably and paint according to your mood. As you paint, you'll discover that sadness can be transformed into something beautiful. The sound of brushes touching paper emerged softly. One black veteran, who had struggled with depression after returning from the Eastern European front, painted a green tree against a gray sky. As he explained, "I painted a tree because it still grows in the mud, even if its leaves turn yellow, it will sprout anew." His eyes glistened with tears. A woman bearing emotional scars from a fire painted a house engulfed in smoke, with a pale purple folding screen behind it. Through choked sobs, she said, "The burning house is the past, and the folding screen represents hope for a new home." Piece by piece, their small artworks were displayed on a wooden rack in the middle of the room. Everyone gathered around, exhaling relief at seeing they weren't alone. The workshop lasted for 3 hours. When soft music signaled its close, they settled down for another cup of tea. Joy and lightness radiated from each face, as though a long-held burden had finally been set down. Back in Vancouver, Orion and Mila continued expanding their art therapy project by collaborating with local counseling centers. They broadened the program so it was no longer just for veterans but also for women who had endured domestic violence and school-aged children overwhelmed by academic pressure. Every weekend, their small studio rang with the sound of brushes on canvas and heartfelt conversation. Some days, they simply listened in silence, allowing participants to unburden their hearts. In helping others heal, they themselves gained new purpose and appreciation for life. They named the project Hands That Rise Above Darkness, a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one warm hand to pull someone out of an abyss. Meanwhile, their graphic design work and exhibition paintings continued. Together with Lee May and Sam, they produced a photo book titled Scars Become Light, a collection of paintings and short stories shared by workshop participants. Each page carried a gentle yet powerful message, capable of moving readers deeply. As the book neared publication, they held a modest launch at the Yaletown Arts Center. Invitees included former colleagues, mental health patients, workshop students, and several journalists. They had once believed they were only helping a few lives. Now, they realized their project had resonated far more broadly than they ever imagined. One Sunday afternoon, as spring began to stir in Vancouver, Orion and Mila walked to a small lecture room at Pacific Art University to speak with a group of art students. They sat on simple plastic chairs, surrounded by projected slides and framed works hanging on the walls. A second-year female student smiled and asked, "Ms. Kovalenko, could you share how you balance your creative work with social therapy?" They seem like completely different paths. Mila brushed her hair aside and answered gently, "When I paint, I don't only think about myself, I think about those who will look at the painting. Every brushstroke is a message I send to others. And when I lead therapy, I listen in order to paint their emotions." The two complement each other. Culture reaches deep into the soul, while therapy brings sharing. Combined, I find a deeper sense of meaning. The students nodded, some hurriedly sketching notes. One turned to Orion and asked about color theory and how to capture light. He smiled as he replied, "Color is the language of emotion. When you need to convey sorrow, use cool or dark tones. When you want to convey hope, add warm accents. The key is listening to your heart and listening to what your audience needs to hear." Amid their busy work and projects, their relationship continued to flourish. They tidied the studio together, cooked simple yet heartfelt dinners. One evening, after the teal and purple tones in their painting Hands That Rise Above Darkness were complete, they relaxed in the living area, scrolling through positive comments from the online community. Some praised the healing power of the work, others shared how the photo book had given them the courage to overcome hardship. Deeply moved, they gently embraced. Orion whispered, "Because of you, we've created something extraordinary." Mila simply smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "Because of you, I found the courage to step beyond the darkness." Every bitter memory from Maple Shore had been transformed into radiant strokes of paint. 5 years after Orion went to prison, their lives had undergone a profound transformation. Now, at age 26, they were not only lovers but also perfectly aligned colleagues and indispensable companions. The Hands That Rise Above Darkness project had expanded into a regular program in 3 major Canadian cities: Vancouver, Victoria, and Calgary. They rented a larger space in Mount Pleasant to serve as both studio and a permanent workshop venue. The 4 walls were painted with a maple shore sunset landscape, evoking their origins and the message of hope. Their meeting room was outfitted with paint palettes, easels, and a projector, continually welcoming those who had endured trauma to share their stories. A small team of 3 full-time staff assisted them: 1 psychologist, 1 art assistant, and 1 communications officer. As for exhibitions, after San Francisco, Orion and Mila received an invitation to Portland, where they organized an interactive showcase. They and Sam flew to Portland, bringing paintings, a projector, and recording equipment. The exhibition featured not just artworks but also invited participants to record their thoughts and feelings while viewing the paintings, then place those audio recordings into a memory box positioned in the center of the gallery. Anyone could step up, pick up the mic, and speak their heart out on the spot. This piece of the project, called A Journey of Voice, extended the original concept by connecting each painting with the audience's own voices. On opening day in Portland, the gallery was packed. What had once been stark, somber paintings now glowed with vibrant color, light permeating every corner. Each visitor received a small card explaining how to participate. Cheers and hushed sobs mingled, as a Latinx veteran stepped forward, activated the microphone, and said, "Last year, I tried to end my life in the hospital barracks, but today I stood here with my wife and children, and I came home." The audience fell silent, then erupted into thunderous applause. An older woman, perhaps the friend of the boy they'd seen in Seattle, lifted her phone to capture the moment, saying, "This is a memory I will keep forever." After that exhibition, Orion and Mila and their team began to clear the gallery. While dismantling frames, a coordinator asked Orion, "Do you think you'll expand this project in Europe? I know in London and Berlin, many people need healing spaces." Orion nodded, "We have plans to go to London next fall. Berlin will be proposed soon after. But we need to secure more funding first." With that done, they walked down the rain-slicked streets, watching the city lights shimmer. Portland's night air was chillier, yet between them, their hearts remained warm. Mila rested a hand on his shoulder. "Are you tired?" He gave a light smile and took her hands. "As long as I have you and the smiles we saw today, I can keep going." That weekend, they returned to Vancouver, only to find an email from Beatrice Schaefer waiting for them. In a lengthy letter, she stated she would no longer provide financial support and threatened to expose Orion's past crimes to destroy their reputation if they continued. This time, her tone was forceful and defiant. "If you don't know how to stop, you will face consequences." But Orion and Mila no longer quaked at her threats. Mila placed the email on the table and said thoughtfully, "She still tries to bind you." He smiled with quiet determination. "I remember the first time I left Maple Shore, my mother tried to send me back to prison that night. But I chose to live for love and hope. Now, her threats are just wind in the sails. We have a community backing us and a project with real social impact. No one can erase what we've built." Mila nodded, her shoulders steady. "I trust you. We are not alone." From that moment on, they no longer paid attention to Beatrice, focusing instead on the journey ahead. A short time later, in summer, Orion hosted a small outdoor concert combined with a painting exhibition at Stanley Park. They invited Lee May, Sam, and a group of indie musicians to perform. Their massive painting, Journey Beyond Darkness, hung on a temporary wooden wall amid the forest. Music drifted through the trees, and warm yellow lights illuminated the dark canvas, creating a magical atmosphere. A long line of attendees formed, families with children, veterans wearing rare smiles. When the performance ended, the crowd rose to applaud and cheer. A young man approached the stage and confessed, "I came here last year to end my life, but seeing the light in that painting and hearing the music made me realize I still have reasons to live." The audience fell silent, then burst into applause once more. Amid that jubilant crowd, Orion and Mila stood hand in hand. She looked at him with pride in her eyes. "I feel like I've grown strong enough to face anything." He nodded, his gaze tender. "Me too. We've journeyed through darkness together, and now we walk into the light." No further words were necessary. They gazed at the painting, listened to the sound of waves on the shore, and awaited the next chapter of their lives. The following autumn, Orion and Mila flew to London to prepare for the Light Beyond Darkness project at Tate Modern. It was a large-scale exhibition where they would display their paintings and host art therapy workshops for refugee communities and those severely affected by healthcare budget cuts. London in fall was gentle. Maple leaves dusted hyacinth gold across Hyde Park, and the streets buzzed with people. They rented a small flat in Southwark, near the museum, with a pedestrian bridge spanning the Thames. The presentation to Tate's organizing committee took place in a formal meeting room. They laid out their project through slides, videos, and sample paintings. Orion began the video, showing Journey Beyond Darkness accompanied by his voice. "We choose to paint because art gives us permission to tell our stories to the world. Art is the language of restless souls." As the slide transitioned to artworks created by refugees, depicting their perilous sea crossings and exile, audience members broke into applause. Finally, they concluded, "We want to bring light and hope to people who have no choice but to flee. If we leave them behind, how long until freedom truly comes?" The jurors paused, then the lead curator smiled and said, "Tate Modern is honored to support this project for 6 months. We will do everything to ensure the exhibition goes smoothly." Overjoyed, Orion and Mila immediately began preparations, reaching out to refugee communities, securing city permits, shipping artworks from Vancouver to London, and arranging additional prints. They recruited 2 local volunteers to assist with translation and community outreach, while Lime flew from Vancouver to coordinate technical logistics. Sam remained in Canada to oversee printing and website updates. During the 3 whirlwind weeks of preparation, Orion and Mila not only installed paintings but also visited refugee centers in Whitechapel, Hackney, and Clapham. Each time they arrived, they brought watercolors, paper, and pencils, guiding refugees to illustrate their own stories, sometimes painting stormy seas they had braved, other times snowy refugee camps, or the first sight of a smiling child after days of hardship. They recorded the narration of these stories and edited them into short video segments to accompany the paintings. Every refugee's face bore the lines of suffering, yet their eyes still held flashes of hope. This project cultivated empathy not only in gallery visitors but also within the artists themselves. On opening day at Tate Modern, the exterior buzzed with people standing and sitting alike. A huge banner reading "Light Beyond Darkness" stretched across the facade. When the museum doors opened, a flood of visitors surged in, hundreds of eyes fixed on Journey Beyond Darkness, now displayed alongside the new Hands of Hope installation and the refugees' framed works. Reporters from major outlets like The Guardian and the BBC covered the event. A photographer quietly moved from corner to corner, capturing tears of emotion on attendees' faces. At the opening speech podium, Orion and Mila stood side by side, he in a black suit, she in a jade green dye, her hair cascading softly over her shoulders. He stepped up to the mic. "We have come from Vancouver with a tale of survival, rebirth, and hope. The paintings you see here are not just images, they are voices of those who endured unimaginable horrors but never abandoned their dreams." A roar of applause followed, mixed with tears on many cheeks. After the London exhibition, Light Beyond Darkness expanded to Berlin, where they partnered with a nonprofit using art therapy for immigrants. In Berlin, they immersed themselves in the contemporary art scene, celebrating the fall of the Berlin Wall. Together with immigrants, they painted a 10-meter-long virtual wall, each person contributing a small panel of color and a personal story. When the wall was complete, they projected a short video mapping each panel to the voice of its creator. Passers-by could interact via their phones, leaving encouraging messages, virtual fragments of love and solidarity. Upon returning to Vancouver from their European tour, Orion and Mila were officially honored with the city's Arts and Community Award, recognizing outstanding contributions to using art for community building. At the ceremony, they were invited on stage as city officials applauded. The council representative said, Orion Schaefer and Mila Kovalenko have shown that art can heal not only individual wounds but also social divisions. They have helped countless people find light in darkness. As they accepted their certificates, Mila felt every heart in the room turn toward her and grasped Orion's hand tightly, overwhelmed with happiness. By the middle of the 8th year since their fateful meeting in Maple Shore, Orion and Mila's lives had far surpassed their high school dreams. They had painted, told stories, healed, and connected thousands of people across North America and Europe. Their Mount Pleasant studio had been expanded, adding an entire floor for exhibitions and a permanent workshop space. They employed 6 full-time staff members, maintained a steady stream of volunteers, and built an extensive network of partners. One chilly Vancouver morning, they awoke in their riverside apartment. The sunrise filtered through the curtains, making the water sparkle like silver. Orion wrapped his arms around Mila from behind and whispered, "Today is a special day, remember?" She gave a shy smile. "Today marks 8 years since we first met after you returned from prison." He kissed the nape of her neck. "It has been a long but wondrous journey. You make me so proud." She turned to face him, eyes shining. "I'm proud of you too. You changed my life." They shared a sweet kiss, as if the world around them vanished. That afternoon, they and their friends Lee May and Sam planned a small studio party to celebrate their 8-year milestone. They decorated the walls with small reproductions capturing each stage of their journey: the first sketch at Riverbend High, the painting Journey Beyond Darkness, then Light Beyond Darkness. A birthday cake sat in the corner, adorned with 2 interlaced hands symbolizing love and unity. As guests arrived, veterans, refugees, scholarship students, and old friends, warm embraces were exchanged. Each attendee wore a gleaming smile and offered heartfelt congratulations. At precisely 8 o'clock that evening, Orion and Mila cut the cake together. Guests gathered around to take photos and raise their glasses in a toast. A professor from Pacific University took each of their hands and said, "You've proven that young people can truly make a difference. You are an inspiration to us all." Friendships, love, and community resonated in a chorus of laughter. The small studio had never felt cozier. The next day, they made the pilgrimage back to Maple Shore, where the wooden gate still seemed to welcome them home. They strolled to the old garden in front of Marcus's house, now filled with tulips and climbing roses. Marcus, who had fully recovered from his psychological treatment and now served as the local liaison for the Hands That Rise Above Darkness project, lived there alone. When they stepped onto the yard, Marcus greeted them with a gentle, proud smile. "Son, daughter, I'm so proud of you both." Evelyn, Mila's mother, emerged from the kitchen doorway, hesitating before stepping out. "I'm so sorry, dear. I never imagined you'd achieve something so good." Her voice broke into sobs as she embraced Mila. "I'm proud that you never gave up." Mila gently wiped away her mother's tears. "I know you were under social pressure. But now we all stand strong." Beatrice Schaefer appeared unexpectedly behind her, joining the reconciliation. I came to apologize for standing in Orion's way. I understand this love more than ever." Orion started to step back in surprise. "Mother." She brushed aside his reaction. "You stood on your own merit and succeeded. I was wrong about you." That moment of family healing filled the air with tears of joy and radiant smiles. They all gathered inside for a warm family dinner, sharing childhood memories, the night Orion had taken the blame, and the first time Mila exhibited in the museum. Their reunion overflowed with heartfelt conversation and tender glances. Beatrice placed a piece of steamed salmon in front of Orion, her voice husky. "You have shown me the true meaning of love and sacrifice." Evelyn gently pulled Mila into her arms. "I will never let you go alone again." Marcus sat nearby, holding both of their hands. "You two are the light in my life." As dusk fell over Maple Shore, painting the lake in golden hues, Orion and Mila walked to the old dock. Beneath a small fountain and weathered wooden benches, they paused. Orion reached into his pocket and retrieved a small black box. Mila looked at him, curious. He knelt down and opened the box, revealing a slender silver ring engraved with two interlaced hands, a symbol of their love and unity. With a smile in his eyes, he said, "Mila Kovalenko, you have led me through every hardship. Will you marry me?" She gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes. Yes, I will." In that instant, the world seemed to tremble with their shared joy. Orion and Mila's wedding was held simply yet warmly at the Maple Shore Community Hall. Wooden chairs were arranged in rows, flanked by long tables draped in white linens. They invited everyone who had been part of their journey from the very beginning: Lee May, Sam, Evelyn, Marcus, Beatrice, Daniel, even veterans, refugees, and students who had come from Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, London, and Berlin. A backdrop on the stage combined Journey Beyond Darkness with their workshop artworks. The violin began as Orion walked down an aisle strewn with red rose petals, roses symbolizing enduring love. He wore a deep blue suit, his hands trembling but his eyes resolute. When he saw Mila appear in her pure white wedding gown, her hair loosely pinned, holding a bouquet of purple tulips, his heart almost leapt from his chest. Reverend Marta, a family friend of the Schaeffers, stood before a small altar with a gentle smile. "Today we witness the union of two brave souls who never lost faith in hope. You have both risen above darkness, and now we celebrate the eternal light of your love." Her words hung in the air, the only sound the quiet lapping of the Maple Shore Lake. Orion placed a ring on Mila's left finger, his voice steady. "Mila, you are my anchor, my reason to stand strong. I promise to love you, protect you, and continue spreading hope through our art." When she replied, "I promise to stand by you, no matter where life takes us, I will always paint with faith," they sealed their vows with a sweet kiss beneath a shower of applause. The wedding reception took place under a simple white marquee by the lakeshore. Guests shared home-style dishes: grilled salmon, creamy mashed potatoes, summer fruit tarts, and local wine. Sam hosted the event and tapped his glass. "Congratulations to Orion and Mila. Let's raise a toast to love that triumphed over every barrier." Lee May wiped tears from her eyes and nodded. "Each person here is a witness to this miraculous journey. We have laughed, we have cried, and we have nurtured hope together." Cheers and laughter rang out, transforming the little studio. Night had fallen, but the warmth inside was brighter than ever. After the festivities, Orion and Mila slipped away from the crowd and strolled along the lakeshore. The Maple Shore night was quiet, moonlight dancing on the water and the shadows of leaning maples. They sat on an old wooden bench, the same bench where they had first confessed their love years ago. Orion wrapped his arms around her, his voice thick with emotion. "Do you remember the day I saved you from darkness in Maple Shore? Then, I never imagined that 8 years later, we'd be sitting here, in Seattle, Victoria, San Francisco, London, Berlin, Portland, and Vancouver, sharing stories of healing." Mila gazed into his eyes, tears of joy welling up. "We have come so far together. I can't imagine where I'd be without you." They sat in peaceful silence, hearts beating in sync with the gentle summer breeze. Though life still held surprises, from this day forward they would walk a path as broad as Maple Shore's lakeshore. They would continue painting, exhibiting, healing, and connecting countless other hearts. But most importantly, they had found a place called home, where love and hope could always take refuge. And when the final Maple Shore sunset faded from the lake, a brilliant new dawn was already rising in the east.